line of regression by hand, and we're going to, but we're not going to actually like use our like TIA3s or anything like that, because it's just it's a very tedious process to get all these products and sums and all that kind of stuff worked out. So the by hand stuff is going to be mainly using Excel to do that. Okay, and then I'll show you some other things, some other tools that might be a little bit more impactful for you. Okay, but using Excel, what we want to do is, obviously I've got the formulas that I want to construct here. Okay, so if we go through here, we're going to need N, we're going to need XY, sum of X, sum of Y, sum of X squared, and sum of X, that quantity squared. So all I'm going to do is write some columns here that are going to create those objects. Okay, so in this first two columns, I got obviously my independent and dependent variables, okay, which is the same numbers we were using yesterday. In this row, I'm going to, well, let's just go through this as we see it. So let's find XY. So I'm just going to write XY as my header. And then XY, that means I'm going to take these two cells and multiply them together. So I'm going to take that cell times then that cell, gives me the product, and then obviously we can just drag that down, and that gives us the product of X and Y. Yes. Yes. Yep. So that's nice. We've got that going through here. So that's, look, as I walk through this, or we walk through this together, I'm just going to cross off the components that we've already made or constructed here. So we've done, my tablet will start up here. There we go. All right, so we're done with that one. Okay. I think what might be appropriate here is now to find that one next. So just write X squared. So I'm just going to say in this header, X caret 2, and then I'm going to hit equals A2, and I'll square that. If I drag that stuff down, okay, I think those are the only two things that we need to make extra columns for. Does that kind of make sense? Everything else is just a sum of whatever we've already got here. Okay, so this next one, I'm just going to say, going left to right, let's go sum of XY. So now that will equal, I'm just going to set equal sum, and then the column that XY was identified in, so I'll just say C to C. What it will do, it will know that XY is a header. It'll see that alpha constructed string, okay, and ignore it. Okay, so that's our sum of XY. We need the sum of X. So I'll hit equal sum, and then that column is A. So A semicolon, or sorry, colon A. Hit enter. Okay, so we got sum of XY, we got sum of X, we need sum of Y. So that's going to be sum of B to B.
Interruption for one more quick announcement. Those individuals who were signed up to assist in decorating for prom should report to the football field at this time. So again, if you had signed up with Mr. Staley to take part in that, please head up.
Funny. Why not? Okay. So the next thing we need is sum of X squared. So equal sum, that's column D. Okay. And then we need the sum, so write this way, the sum of x, that quantity squared. So that will be equals, so I'm going to put parenthesis, sum of x's, which was a, actually we could do this, it'd be easier to do it this way, because we already have the sum of x, right? So I'm just going to say equals that cell, and then we'll square that, and we get that number. All right, so if we were traditionally doing this by hand, you would have had to come up with all of these products. You would have had to come up with all of these, essentially, products as well. You have to sum them all, okay, and that's going to be very time-consuming, correct? Okay. So now in this box here, I'm going to say M. Okay. And if we want to build this, guys, if this is something that you want to use to get these values later on for other problems, we maybe need a cell that will identify the amount of data that we have. So I'm just going to say over here in J, I'll hit equals, and if we go count A, okay, and so I'm going to do that. So what that's going to do is it's going to count everything that I have in every cell that is in column A that has something in it, and then it's going to remove one, so it's going to remove this one here because it doesn't have any number. And that should, because I know I have 10 pieces of data, that should result in 10. So now if I put a maybe 11th piece of data in, you can see how that changes, right? And all the other values as well changed. So this can be kind of a working document that you can use to address other situations. So now finding M, all we have to do is write a formula here, okay? So what I like to do when I have these formulas written out in specifics like this, and I'm going to try to write it for Excel, is I say, okay, well, N we have written over here in J2. So I'm going to rewrite this as J2. Okay, it's going to be times, now the sum of xy. I have sum of xy, that's in E2. Okay, so that right there takes care of that. Does that make sense? I'm going to go minus, now the sum of x, that was in F2, times the sum of y, which was in G2. Okay. Now, because of order of operations, all I know is that I'm going to have to put parentheses around there for that to be done correctly. And then we'll come down here to the denominator. N, again, was J2. Okay. Now, the sum of x squared was H2. And it'll be minus the sum of x, that quantity squared, which was what? I2. And again, I'll need parentheses around that denominator as a grouping symbol. So once I do that, then I can go ahead and just type that stuff in. So J2, you cannot Excel does not know what implied multiplication is. So like if I want to take J2 times E2 and I did something like that, okay, it's not going to know what that is. I have to actually use the multiplication sign. So J2, E2, minus F2 times G2, that'll be my numerator, divided by, now go J2 times H2 minus then, I don't know why I put a square, that's I2. So I2, close my parentheses off, and that should give me M. Is it okay? So that's the slope. That is the slope of the line of best fit. Now what we want to do is find B. Okay? Which B is going to be the sum of y divided by n minus m times the sum divided by n. Okay? So remember the sum of y. We already got the sum of y. That's G2. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this with, that's going to be G2. This was J2. Sum of x was F2. This is J2. In M we have in F5. Okay, so I'm just going to try, I'm going to just choose, just so I can see everything here at once. I'm going to put B right here. I'll say B. And then down here I'm going to say it's G2 divided by F2. Or sorry, it's J2. Sorry. J2. So G2 divided by J2. Now it'd be minus M, which was that cell right there, times now F2 divided by J2. And like I said, it doesn't know this implied multiplication, so I've got to put a multiplication sign there. And that should give me the correct B value. Okay? Is that all right with everybody? So now, and you can probably program that. I know you can, to put these together and actually write your line. But I'm going to just jump over to, I'm going to copy those over just to prove this so we can graph this easily. You can graph it in Excel if you wanted to. I just think it's going to be easier to mess around with in this table in Desmos. What is nice about Desmos in Excel is that I can take a table from Excel, I can copy it, come to the table on Desmos, and you can paste it. You can Control V, and it'll put that in there for you. Okay. So now, all we have to do is type in. Just gonna let it ring. What was our? So our slope was 196.152. So say y equals 196.12x. Okay. So you start to see that, that does look a little bit like our data here. Maybe it represents our data. I guess it was 152, so I'll change that. And then this number here will be my B value. So 152 plus then that ends up being my y-intercept out to 6 or 7 decimal places there. But that ends up being then our line of best fit. Okay? Does that make sense? And it does model our data, right? So the purpose of this is say, okay, well, this should then predict, because the way this was generated, it was generated off of using all 10 data points, and it is the one in which the sum of squares of these residuals is the smallest. So when we use this line to predict data that is unrealized yet, so data beyond, a value of like 6 out here, okay, because we don't have any data that was observed out here. It's going to predict, okay? So what we're saying is that it's not going to give me exactly what it would be if the input was 6. But what it will do is gives us the guarantee that once I do observe the data of 6 in comparison to the actual value, or the predicted value versus the actual value, that actual value, that residual that shows up from it, will be minimized. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's really what we're doing there with finding that regression. Okay, so as we do this in this whole scheme of things, first thing we want to do is find our correlation coefficient. That tells us whether there is a strong positive or negative linear relationship. Okay. Then we want to run it through a hypothesis test to see if there is significance to it. Once we do that, if all that stuff pans out and says, yes, there's a strong significance here for a linear relationship, then we want to go through what we just did to find actually what the equation of the line is. Okay. Now, that being said, if we go to Desmos, if you type in all your information in Desmos, okay, now pay attention to how your labeling is being used in your table, okay, and you can change those subscripts if you want to. Desmos has the ability to do everything we just did very quickly. If I go Y, so you got to use the Y that is in your table. So Y2 is what I'm using. So I'm going to hit Y, and now I'll hit Shift _, and I'll put a 2 in, okay? Then I'm going to hit Shift, the key to the left of 1, so it's going to give me that tilde. And then I'm going to go M, X, Shift _, and the X's that I'm using are subscript 2. And I'm going to add to it then B. And what it does is it creates those statistics for me. Does it give me my M that we came up with by hand? And does it give me my Y-intercept that we came up with by hand? Does that kind of make sense? Also, what is this here? That's your R. That's your correlation coefficient. Okay. If you want to plot the residuals, okay, those blue values, okay, so this blue value right here is going to show you, it's graphing across, so it's comparing it to 0. It's this distance that this first point was away from the line of regression. This distance here is then modeled right there, okay? That distance for that third point is right there, okay? So the closer that these blue points are to the line y = 0, tells me that they were closer to the line of regression. Does that make sense? So you can do that if you want to. I don't know that you'll ever need to plot the residuals like that, but you can. Does that make sense? So again, what is Desmos doing? It's capturing all our input, okay? And once it captures that, it is running it through the exact same thing that we just built here. Is that okay with everybody? All right. So I think it's important not only when you're using calculators, when you're using whatever tools to help you assist in finding values, to actually understand how that calculator is computing those things. I would say that throughout my teaching career, through my student career, taking undergrad, taking graduate classes, all that kind of stuff, if the better you understand the way something works, okay, the better then you can use it. And the more apt you are to be able to discover if it's doing something wrong. Does that make sense? Okay, and usually when it's doing something wrong, it's because we've inputted something incorrectly. But if you know that, hey, that's not giving me what it should produce. It doesn't look like it's giving me really the line of regression because that doesn't mesh well with what the definition of a line of regression is. So then you can go back and analyze, okay, well, what did I type in wrong? What did I do on the user end of things to make things go amiss? Is this cool? Can we do this? All right, so next week we'll come back with this stuff a little bit on Monday. I'm not going to open an assignment. I don't want you guys to have to worry about any homework over the weekend. Be safe, okay?